performing very well.
Okay. Who's your model leader from Indian industry and why?
Very difficult to say.
Oh, you have actually seen leaders evolve from the 70s to the 90s and the present decade. What do you think are the... has the model leader changed?
My model leader or role model in a sense in the Indian leadership would be late Professor Ravi Mathai, who was the director of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. And before that, he was the CEO of a British company, which he turned around. And then he joined the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, from where he migrated to Ahmedabad. Now, since we saw him in operation, so a few things helped me, impressed me a great deal. Number one, that he was very clearly focused of what his job was. And he thought his job was to turn a mediocre institute, which was Ahmedabad at that time, into a first-rate institute, which became one of the Asia's best institutes.
Right.
The second thing was that he trusted people around him and gave all the freedom necessary to operate under him. The third important thing, that he saw his role as bringing more and more resources. So he became a boundary management. He did boundary management of the institute by linking with larger organizations and by bringing more and more resources to the institute and helping people to perform well.
Right.
And finally, he gave all the liberty and autonomy to the faculty. And I think we felt that probably there was no leader in a way.
Right.
But all the time, Ravi was around whenever we needed any consultation and help from him.
Okay.
So this was, I thought, was a good example of a great leader.
Okay. And do you find any mirror image of this person
Yes,
anywhere now in the industry?
Yeah. In fact, Mr. Narayan Murthy is a good example.
Okay.
And in fact, my guess is that his stint in IIM Ahmedabad, when he was here in the earlier days, shaped his whole thinking. And so when he went to and founded Infosys and became so successful in that, I think this was Ravi's influence, it seems to me. So this is another person, the same way he was so modest, his own personal humility, and yet he was what Collins calls very strongly professional will. Now these, I think, was reflected as much in Ravi as they were reflected in Narayan Murthy. And I think he seems to be another good example of how you can have a combination of personal humility and strong professional will, which will make you a great leader.
Right. Okay. This is more a reflection on what we have been doing by way of leadership here. It is said, as an aside, that workshops don't make leaders. Training programs don't make leaders. So what we have done is we have put together a 8-week program where we regularly at the end of the week meet with them wherever they are, online. That's also been a challenge for us, and talk to them about leadership styles, tell them these leadership stories about Murthy and Ravi Mathai, expose them to a good deal of what is happening by way of leadership research. We have also put in a 360-degree feedback process for them. Do you think this is a good, effective starting point for building leadership in individuals? As a program, for instance, or you could just talk about whether this 360-degree feedback and these inputs we are giving, whether it will help individuals.
I think these seem to be useful inputs which will help them to both get exposed to different ways in which people have contributed to leadership, how leaders have become more effective, At the same time, it will help them to look at themselves.
Yes.
So if you also expose them for self-examination through use of some instruments, through exercises, through their own reflection on how they have been performing as different contexts in the leadership position, etc. Probably these are going to help, I think.
Okay. But this exercise is always a constant process. It's a journey.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop.
That's right, yeah, I know. And I think this is certainly leadership is also a journey.
Okay.
There is no end.
Okay.
And I think that once the process is started, I think that this is also self-reinforcing, that it continuously goes on and on.
Right.
So all the good luck and best wishes.
Sure, thanks. I have one more question.
Oh yeah, please.
It is said that leaders, there's a study of several CEOs in the country, referring to the Indian CEO and other studies in the area, which say that the present breed of leaders show strong entrepreneurial competencies.
Yeah.
Would you think that this is a necessity for a lot of leaders, because not many are exposed to that kind of thinking?
Well, I think the very concept of leadership is to break new grounds. And when, in that sense, entrepreneurial orientation is an important orientation. Now, this does not mean necessarily that it must only get into new businesses and so on, but it helps to have a sense of assessing what is needed in the situation, to have a sixth sense, the intuition of what will work and what will not work. So I think that way, it seems to me that entrepreneurial orientation is extremely useful for leadership. I certainly just use very nice. And most of you are right, it shows that when you are, for example, going for mergers and acquisitions, then you should have this entrepreneurial orientation of a person.
Yes.
And that will help.
There have been very few studies, at least published, documented studies in India on Indian leadership. A lot of these studies have been one-off studies by Wharton, by some of the Ivy League schools there, and interestingly by Indian professors at these schools. Do you think this is going to be a challenge for academia in India? Because so much less is being written about perhaps one of the most critical areas in business today.
You are right. I think most of the studies that I have read, and certainly I have not read everything, but most of these studies show that there is more descriptive studies of how they see leaders operating, rather than real research in what has people leaders, what has made them leaders. So the basic, like Collins' recent work, or like Bennis's new work, in which he has found that leaders go through some crucibles, etc. Now, such breakthrough thinking about the development of leaders has not taken place. And I think that shows us that our intellectual rigor is not strong enough. And I think we are only searching the surface. And we are very good journalists, so most of the studies are journalistic studies in terms of describing, and very good description of the leaders. Good books have come out. But I think we need some basic research to understand how Indian ethos and Indian culture is contributing to the development of leaders as contrasted with other countries. Because we have our own unique way of things coming up in the culture. And I hope new research will come out. I think Dr. Rao